you have an idea for a show and want to get involved, email info@salamradio.co.uk.
Assalamu alaikum and welcome to Salam Radio. This is 106.2 FM. I'm back. This is Imtiaz Ali here on Why Politics Matters, here with my main man Alex Blower. Alex, welcome.
Salam and good evening.
Salam, it's been a while, hasn't it? We've not been on air for a while.
It's been a long minute.
Bloomin' Perda.
Yeah,
that's kept me away for a little while, and then just the fallout from the local elections. We're joined by leader of the Green Group and Green Councillor, Councillor Nicola Day. Welcome, Nicola.
Salam, and thank you for having me.
Thank you. Welcome. Second time on the show. We had a really good show last time you were on. Remind me, what did we talk about when we last on?
We were talking about climate change and the environment and those issues,
which is obviously very pertinent, very important topics, and obviously something that the Green Party nationally is all over. But the purpose of the show today is about local democracy. It comes at a good time because we've just had local elections. And Alex, you've just had a new experience as well, haven't you?
Yeah, a little bit out of my comfort zone. Being in the town hall for the count on election night. It was my first time being there for the event. Which
I find really surprising because you're a very political person. Now, you're not usually affiliated to political parties, but you're usually a very, very political person. So for you to have not been to a count, that must have been like an eye-opener, but also a little bit surprising that was the first time.
Yeah, well, I mean, I've never really got involved in much campaigning, to be honest. Not since not since the Labour Party took its steps towards the centre and then further towards the right.
Okay.
So it's not really something, I suppose, that's interested me quite in the same way as what it did this year. And particularly this year, we had a couple of interesting seats up for contestation locally, didn't we? And I think going into the local elections, we were all a little bit apprehensive, a little bit filled with anxiety in the hopes that there was going to be some real change.
Yeah. And not much real change, really. At the end of all of that, not really much has changed, which we are going to talk about today. So,
no change, but there were certainly some stories from the night, wasn't there?
Plenty of stories.
Yeah, and I think that's maybe where it'd be a good place to start off with some of the local successes, because we did have candidates that actually broke electoral history in our local area that night, didn't we?
Yeah. But even before we do that, Nicola, can maybe could just give us an outline of how local government works? How many councillors do we have? How often do we have elections? That kind of stuff. Just give us an overview for people listening who might not know, because a lot of this is quite opaque for most people unless you're involved in it quite on a day-to-day.
Well, we have elections in thirds, so we have elections every year.
Okay.
Every year, and then on the fourth year we have a fallow year. And what happens in each ward is that one of those councillors is up for election between different parties, depending on where parties stand candidates. So after the local elections this year, it was really even Stevens. So we had the Conservatives with 30. That was the end of the night on that election night.
Yeah.
And then we had the opposition combined on 30 councillors. So it looked at that point after the local elections like, the mayor would be given the cast and vote on a lot of issues. However, as you probably know, and as probably many of the listeners know, we had 4 Conservatives defect to the Independents. So now we've got a position where we have 34 opposition councillors and 26 Conservatives. So we have 14 Labour, 8 Lib Dems, 8 Independents now, 3 Greens and 1 Independent sitting on her own out of the 60 councillors, and 26 Conservatives. So it has changed the dynamic, but more so from defections than elections.
Yeah.
I think what we could also say is that Labour bucked the national trend where Labour were picking up seats in places. In Peterborough, that didn't actually happen. And the Conservatives, again, bucked the national trend and picked up a couple of seats that they weren't expecting to pick up. And I think that's an interesting story. And in a moment, I'll talk about the sort of Green successes. But I think, as an overview, I'd say that's a good summary of,
Yeah, that's really useful. Really useful to know. A lot of numbers there. We'll try and unpick those. But high level, then 60 councillors. You need 31 to form an administration. Going into these local elections, the Conservatives didn't quite have 31, did they? I think they had 30 or 29.
They had 30. No, they had 27, didn't they? And they picked up 2. No, they had 20. 8.
It was close. It was
Yeah,
close. I
yeah,
mean,
they
they
picked
were
up
still
2.
forming an administration. So,
Yeah.
so there was a lot of questions last year about why we couldn't wrestle control. When I say we, I mean non-conservative groups. So at the time I was Labour, you obviously Green. Why we as a collective couldn't form a coalition and wrestle control away from the Conservatives. And this time, if Peterborough had followed the national trend, they'd have gone down from the 28 to maybe about 26, 25. And that really would have put pressure on the opposition parties to form a coalition, because that's a clear mandate from your electorate to say, we're fed up with the Tories, can we have something different? But like you say, it bucked the national. Peterborough always bucks the national trend, Alex. I mean, we had more Conservatives in as councillors after the elections and before the elections, and I think Peterborough was one of only 2 places around the country that had that.
Yeah.
What do you think that caused?
What were the reasons behind it?
Yeah, or maybe I mean, Park Ward obviously is the key one, isn't it?
Yeah, well, Answer Ali, long entrenched and established local councillor, has been representing that area for a very, very long time.
Excellent councillor.
A great ward councillor as well.
Yeah.
I think him moving away has caused some ripple effects. But beyond that, I mean, I'll be honest, politics in Peterborough just bemuses me at the best of times.
Yeah.
I mean, you've just told a story about historically the proportion of seats held in the Peterborough Council. And as much as these balances haven't this time changed, historically, we have to ask the question, why do we still have a Tory government when the Conservatives cannot have enough seats to form that majority on their own? Why is the coalition not being formed?
So are you talking locally or nationally?
Locally.
Locally. Why is that coalition not being
Yeah,
formed?
I mean, I
Right.
know this is a story which happens nationally as well.
Yeah.
And from what I understand, the 2019 by-elections and also 2020 or 2021, a lot of local Labour parties were given directives from the National Labour Party, from the National Executive Committee, the NEC, banning them from forming coalition governments. I'm sure you two have heard these tales yourself.
Coalition administrations. Yeah,
Coalition
yeah.
administrations,
Yeah, yeah.
sorry, local administrations, yeah. Now, there has been some whispers that now, this time around, as much as all these local Labour parties have been given the same instruction from the NEC, some are regaling against it. There are Labour parties today that have been told, no, you're not allowed to form a coalition with these other local parties, but are saying, no, we want to change, we need a change, our local residents deserve a change,
Sure.
and are forming these coalitions.
So this is one of the, for me personally, this is one of the most frustrating things about politics, and we've spoken about this in the past, Nicola, haven't we? Like, you don't really know where you stand. It's almost like they make rules up as they go along. Like, there should be a national official directive that says, right, we are willing to form coalitions, or we are not willing to form coalitions. If we are willing to form coalitions, these are the groups that we would be entertaining, and these are the groups we absolutely wouldn't. So you wouldn't expect Labour to form a coalition with the Conservatives. That's they sit on opposite sides of the fence theoretically. So for the Conservatives, it's quite easy, and they formed a coalition government with the Liberal Democrats to keep Labour out of power way back. I think it was 2010, wasn't it? And I'm sure Labour would have formed a coalition with the Liberal Democrats to keep the Conservatives out of power. So that's at a national level. At a local level, last year, absolutely, Labour, Lib Dems, Greens, and Peterborough First. I don't know if they were Warrington First at the time.
They were
Warrington
Warrington
First.
First. at the time,
So between them, they could have formed a coalition, and they didn't. Go on, Nicola,
Yeah,
just tell me.
so as group leader of the Greens, we were in talks with the other parties, with the Lib Dems. This is last year, after last year's
after
local
last year's
election.
yeah.
And we were in talks with the Independents and Labour and the Lib Dems. And we managed, I think we hadn't got complete committal from everybody, and we as Greens, we don't get directed
that's interesting.
on what we should or shouldn't do. We get trusted as local politicians to know what our city needs.
So you could make a decision locally that benefits you as a group and you as the local population.
Yeah.
Wow.
And we get mentoring, so we certainly...
That's an interesting way of doing things, isn't it?
Well, it allows you to represent your electorate, the people that have put you in the place where you're sitting,
Yeah.
in the way that you best feel fit.
Yeah, we got mentoring from people that are more experienced than us, councillors who've been councillors for 20 years, and they were very much supportive of whatever we wanted to kind of go ahead and do with those other parties. Unfortunately, the coalition wasn't formed, and it was because at the time Labour's NEC wasn't up for entertaining a coalition of those four specific parties.
Sure.
And coalitions are difficult. You know, we have to meet with the group leaders. We have to, there are, will that independent group vote with us on particular issues? Do we have too many political differences? But certainly as Greens, and I've always said this, I've even said this year in the press, we are very committed. If we think that's best for the city, we'll form a coalition. I think one thing that maybe prevented us this year is that the Conservatives now, don't have a majority, and they've lost 4 seats to defections.
Yeah.
And I think with those discussions, there was a feeling that we would like the public to vote that change in power. So rather than it come through people that were voted as Conservatives that have moved across, we would rather the public vote and vote that majority.
I get that point. I get that point. So what you're saying is that's the mood between the leaders, co-leaders, whatever. But you personally, you'd still be open to a coalition. If there was a coalition going on the table, you'd certainly be open to it.
As Greens, we would.
As Greens, we would, yeah. And I guess then things like who chairs the different scrutinies, who's the leader and who's the deputy leader, and who's the financial officer, and all that kind of stuff. They're the kind of things that you'd iron out as group leaders and probably pick the person that's most appropriate for each role.
Absolutely. And one thing we did get, once we knew that we had more of a majority, is we did manage to wrestle the opposition group chairs back and kept those within the opposition. That was something that we were negotiating with the Conservatives at one point, but we managed to retain that. So we do have an element of influence and control that we possibly may not have had to the extent that we've got it if those defections hadn't happened. So that's, so there is some element of us taking control of some of those things.
Okay, let's pull out. Sorry, go on, Alex.
Yeah, no, I agree pretty much with everything you've just said. Apart from one point, I am going to challenge, and that was with regards to asking the electorate to vote that change in place with regards to those that have regaled over to the other party. And as you both know, I've always flown the flag for independence over party politics locally anyway.
Yes, you have.
Because at the end of the day, the system we have is representative democracy. And we will have heard Tory leaders flying this flag. No, I am the leader. I have been voted in. These are the plans I'm going to push forward. I've been given that mandate. And the reason that they have that mandate is because of what we're talking about, is that representative democracy. And once you've been elected in, you've got the mandate to represent the people that have elected you in the way that you best seem fit. Now, whether or not I agree with representative democracy over direct democracy or other forms, that's different, but we are dealing in a system which is representative democracy, and if that power change comes because people have regaled over, then that power change is coming, I would argue, because of elected councillors representing the people that elect them.
I've got some sympathy with that with you because I think once you're elected as a councillor, you have your own free will to do whatever you do on the council. You can make your own decisions, and you're saying people have trusted me to make these decisions.
Yeah. And sometimes you might be tied because of these party politics, which are making them way from Westminster into local.
So these 4 defections, you could argue that they've been elected to represent their constituents, and they are doing that the best way they can by moving away from the party. You could argue that.
That's a really good point that I haven't really absorbed or taken on board. I mean, that was these kind of, that idea has come from some discussions, but that's a really good point, which I agree with.
I want to put it back to some of the election results specifically, and we'll start talking about a couple of green results, and we'll move on to a couple of red results and a couple of blue results as well. I'm not too close to any massive yellow successes, but we'll talk about what we know about. So firstly, congratulations to you on being re-elected.
Well done.
70% of the vote share, pretty much 69.8 or whatever it was, 70%. That was the highest vote share for any candidate for any ward in the whole of Peterborough this year.
Yes, it was, yeah.
So the safest seat in Peterborough you have?
Absolutely. And I have to say
that's incredible.
It is incredible, and that's come from the last 4 or 5 years of hard work in the ward and being visible and residents wanting that and seeing what we do. And I think that, and that just showed with the result that we got, that we got the highest amount of votes for a councillor, for example, as well, the highest vote share. And actually in our ward now in Waterville, it's not necessarily. We initially, when we stood, we were selling ourselves as particular people, but actually, this is the 5th year people have voted Green. They like what they get. They know that we're hard-working councillors, and now it's more about them. They vote Green. A lot of people know who I am, but they might be like, "Oh, out of those people, I know that they are the Green Party."
We know the Green Group works hard.
They're not necessarily voting for individuals for the hard work they do, but actually, they like what they get when they get given a Green councillor, and they want to keep.
That's just modesty on Nicola's part, isn't it, Alex?
Well, I mean, I would argue that what I've seen from them is good ward counselling.
Yeah.
They're known in their wards. They knock on doors and people know who they are.
Yeah.
And I don't think the same can be said for a lot of our current councillors and those who have been sitting there for quite some time as well.
Yeah. And then the other big success was holding on to the seat in Orton Longville. So talk to us a little bit about why that's so special, because that was almost a historic win, wasn't it, for Heather Skipstead?
Really historic. So Heather joined us last summer after being suspended for Labour for about 16 months, and it never really been sort of sorted out. So she joined us as a Green, and at the time we knew that there's never been a councillor that's defected in Peterborough for 20 years and then got elected into that new party. So this is really historic. Now, not only did... Yeah, and I have to say, the campaign manager, the campaign team, there was an incredible amount of work put in, but particularly from Heather herself. And she managed, we started the campaign in the summer and we were knocking on doors all the way through towards the election, knocking on doors every day. And we saw a shift from voters that were definitely voting Conservatives in the summer, and we managed to move them and switch them over to Green voters. Now, she didn't just get a small majority, she got a majority of 300, which was her best ever result as a councillor. So it just shows, and we knew that Heather's ward could be quite tough because Labour and Conservatives both campaign in that ward. So there was a 3-horse race really, and she came out miles above everybody. So as I say, first time in 20 years that someone who's defected from another party, there's actually one in Peterborough, but also a first time for the Greens. We've managed to sort of really hold, as you know, as we've just been talking about, Orton Waterville as pretty much a stronghold. But Orton Longville was the first other ward we've now broken into.
Yep.
So
this is the first time you've become a multi-ward party.
Multi-ward party in the city. So, and we had a lot of successes around the country as well. I mean, in the local elections across the country, there were 240 seats, more than 240 seats gained by the Greens. And nationally and locally, actually, we were the 3rd best performing party in terms of vote share and people that we got elected.
That's amazing.
So yeah, the Greens are nationally and locally, but Orton Longville we really, really wanted it, and it was particularly poignant that we won it, and not just by 20 or 30 votes, but by 300.
Yeah. And the other thing was, sorry, just to cut in there, the other thing was, I think there's been a large number of defections from Labour to Greens, and even some Conservative to Greens as well. And of all those that defected, I think there was only 3 wins of those defectors, and one of them was Heather Skipstead in the whole Eastern region.
Yeah.
So, I mean, that's a fantastic result. Sorry, Alex, you were going to...
No, I was just wondering. You may know that I was down in Westminster for a lobbying event for starting the system for moving away from first past the post to proportionate representation earlier in the week, and I was just listening to what you were saying about the vote share and that national shift, and I was just wondering, are you aware of what your overall share was in the Peterborough area?
That's something we're still looking at.
Our overall share was, I've seen it on Politics of Peterborough, we came 3rd.
Right, okay.
We came 3rd locally in terms of it was in terms of our vote share and our performance, we were the 3rd best performing party in Peterborough.
I'd be really interested as well in just how far behind the 2 main parties you were, and how much that's changed from the previous by-elections as well, because that will give you actually a little bit of a clearer indication of your real representation of the through the Peterborough electorate. How many people are actually voting for us overall, as opposed to that.
I strongly suspect that we've definitely still got fewer councillors than we've got percentage vote share.
Sure.
So
strongly, I feel.
Yeah, we're probably about 10% vote share, which would translate to 6 councillors, and we've got 3. So I think it's around there.
Can I say also, to add on, while we're talking about the Green campaigning, we actually stood in 6 wards, all in all. We were keeping an eye on 3 of those. That was Orton Waterville, Orton Longville and Fletton and Woodston, as you know. But we actually also campaigned in 3 other wards. So we actually were campaigning in 6 wards. That is, again, a really historic campaign. I was asked by the PT at the beginning of the night, what are you looking at? And I said, this is the biggest campaign we've run with the most candidates, and we've never run a campaign like that. So I think that maybe, well, I would say that almost certainly helped us to gain those results in terms of vote share. But statistically and numbers, I don't have the numbers on me, I'm afraid.
That'd be an interesting
Yeah,
story.
We'll
I
do
think.
that. We'll do that next week. I'll pull them together.
Let's have a look.
Let's talk about the successes of the Labour group. So the Labour group have had a rough few months leading up to the local elections. They've had a defection. Obviously, I was a defection.
Yeah.
Heather was a suspension. She chose to defect back in September. Then they had resignation of their leader, long-term leader, Shaz Nawaz. And then they had another resignation in the same ward, Park Ward, with Ikri Yassin. It just felt like they were all over the place. And yet they've pulled out some really good, surprising results. Oh, sorry. Also, the resignation of Councillor Ansar Ali we mentioned earlier. So North Ward, Ansar Ali, well-known, well-loved, long-term servant of the community, stood as an independent candidate. Go on.
Ansel was a little bit bigger than his own ward, though, wasn't he?
He's much bigger than his own ward.
And he was also very much a strong proponent of Shaz. Helped, I feel, historically with Shaz's political career.
Mine as well. I'm more than happy to say mine as well, yeah.
So I feel that him going, even though it was North Ward, I feel that the ripples have been felt across that part of Labour, and especially that side, a little bit deeper than just within North.
Genuinely a good observation, yeah. I'd agree with that. I'd agree with that. And to add on to that, the fact that Shaz has gone as well.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Now, Greens, you guys obviously weren't running a hard campaign there, but Fiona was running.
Fiona Magic, yeah.
And she had the best result in that area for Greens historically as well, didn't they?
Absolutely. She got 560 votes, which was incredible.
Now, I would say that's representative of that shift that we're talking about as well, isn't it? Of a loss of enfranchisement with what people historically recognise as the local Labour Party in Shaz, in Ansar.
But in spite of that, they did have successes, and this is what I was going to try to pull out. Was so Asim Mahmood won in North Ward, tightly fought between Asim Mahmood and obviously Ansar Ali. The Conservative candidate didn't really pick up many votes. You'd have thought the Conservatives might take advantage of that Labour split and the fact that you'd have two well-known Labour faces going for the Labour vote, and they could potentially split the vote and sneak in, but they didn't really work there.
Ended up between the two of them, didn't it?
It pretty much did, yeah. So Asim Mahmood's the new guy on the block. I don't know if you had a chance to meet him in the full councils yet.
Yeah, haven't met him yet, but we'll introduce myself to him.
Yeah, absolutely. So he's the new councillor for North Ward. Obviously a ward that's quite close to your heart because you do a lot of work there, especially with the Millfield Community Fridge, and there's a lot of Lama Iqbal Centre and all that kind of stuff. There's a lot of community projects that go on there. So that'll be interesting to see how that pans out. And then also the other success was Richard Strangewood in Breton, which was a win for Labour from the Conservatives. Now, for me, personally, that looks like the national shift.
I agree.
Yeah.
Breton is one of those
taking
seats,
nothing away from the candidate. I mean, I never want to undermine the work that candidates do. I'm sure he did a lot of hard work. But I feel like the shift there was always a tightly contested seat. And given you've had a national move of Tory to Labour voters of about 20%, that's pretty much eaten up into the Tory lead and got the win for Richard.
Yeah, I would agree that Breton does reflect the national mood. So and it flips. So we've had it dominated by the Conservatives, and that's and taken away from Labour by the Conservatives. But now it's moved back into, swung back into its territory as Labour. And I would say that Breton is one of those seats that doesn't buck the national trend. It follows that, and that's one reason why as Greens it's more difficult for us, because we don't get as much national press coverage as the other main party, so we have to do quite a lot more work on the ground.
Well, you have to come on Salam Radio, don't you?
Yes, we have to come on Salam Radio. But one thing I would say is that Carla Denyer, who is one of our co-leaders, her obviously we're talking about Labour, but one of her theories about the Greens doing so well, so for example, we won mid-Suffolk, complete control of the council, absolutely wiped the slate clean of Conservatives. Sure. But she feels that our success has been down to deep dislike of the Tories and Starmer's uninspiring Labour. So whether that has anything to do with that, but definitely Breton was one of those seats that I think reflects the national mood. Yeah,
and then finally the other successful Labour, which I don't really want to talk about, was my loss in Fletton and Woodston, but very, very surprising though, very, very surprising for both the Labour camp there and also the Conservative camp there, was they had a third-time candidate, Andrew Wiley, for the Conservatives, and Nick Thurlborn, who's been in and around Fletton and Woodston for a while, but obviously because I was councillor and Alan was councillor, he never quite got the chance. He's come along. So me standing independent, I think pretty much everyone felt that was going to buck the national trend as well, and the Conservatives would hold it because I would split the Labour vote. As it turned out, I think I've taken votes off of both the Conservatives and Labour. So, and I think, and you're familiar with this a lot more than I am, but Greens tend to get votes from both parties.
Both, yeah, absolutely.
And it just means that both of their vote shares come down, but the national trend has shifted.
Did that happen in your ward, or the ward that you were standing in, Imtiaz? Did the vote share come down?
Oh yeah.
Those main parties?
Both of them. They both lost about 150 to 200 votes.
Right.
Nick Thurlborn won with 200 votes fewer than I won with 2 years ago. So and the turnout was similar.
Right.
But it was really interesting to watch because I kind of knew, like, about an hour in, I knew I wasn't in the running to win. I was going to finish, third, pretty much. But the other two were neck and neck all the way through. So it was really funny to watch how their emotions would peak and trough based on how the votes are coming out. We're through the first half of the show already. I feel like we've not talked about anything. So, guys, thank you so much for joining us for the first half. Do get your comments in. We'll talk a little bit more about the options at the City Council and some of the other successes straight after the break. Join us in about 4 minutes. Thank you.
Stay tuned to Salam Radio after this short ad break.
At Master's Pharmacy, we put your health and convenience first. We offer free blood pressure checks and blister-packed medication. With our free same-day prescription delivery service, you can have your medication when you need it. We also offer travel vaccinations, including Hajj and Umrah, along with other services to meet all your pharmacy needs. For more information, contact Master's Pharmacy on 01733 567 208 or visit us at 303 Lincoln Road, PE1 2PH.
Where can you get high quality and low prices? Amar Food Store and Halal Meat in Lincoln Road, Triangle is the place to go. Pay us a visit and take advantage of our special offers and great range of products on groceries, vegetables, fruits and halal meat. Also send money to Pakistan absolutely free. We have all top brands at special offers, offer free customer parking and provide a free local delivery service. Amar Food Store and Halal Meat, 613B Lincoln Road, Peterborough. Call us on 01733 687 374. High in quality, low in prices.
Masterminds Tuition Academy is for your high schoolers, your something to provers, your subject strugglers and keen learners, your brave jumpers and fist pumpers. Affordable personalised learning plans are delivered through our centres in schools across Peterborough. But not to worry, we also provide online and home visits with flexible timings. Whether it is maths, English, science or 11+, Masterminds is a must. Find us on all socials and visit our website mastermindstuitionacademy.com or call us on 07516 166 003. Masterminds, master the matrix.
Thinking of laser hair removal but worried about cost? Well Skin Clinic, Peterborough's #1 aesthetic clinic, offers 0% finance on courses of laser hair removal. We perform thousands of treatments using the Soprano titanium in our prestigious clinic. Virtually pain-free and suitable for all skin types, our team of aesthetic professionals can help you achieve your goals affordably. Well Skin Clinic, making life-changing aesthetic treatments affordable for all. 40 Cowgate, Peterborough. Call or WhatsApp us on 01733 555540.
Satisfy your cravings at Ibrahimi Buffet Restaurant. Enjoy a tantalising variety of Chinese, Italian, Pakistani and comfort food favourites, from starters to desserts. Kids under 5 dine for free, so bring the whole family to our location at 63 Sycamore Avenue. Open every day from 5 p.m. till 10:30 p.m. Call us on 01733 313131 or book online to reserve your table. Ibrahimi-restaurant.co.uk. Every bite is a delight at Ibrahimi Buffet Restaurant.
You could be driving, you might be cooking, you could even be working. But whatever you're doing, you're also listening to Salam Radio. And if you're in business, your potential new customers could be listening too. So talk to them and let them know what you have to offer. Advertising on Salam Radio is affordable and effective. And by doing so, you're also supporting this valuable and important voice within the community. Call 07866 319 679 or find Salam Radio online and across social media.
Peterborough's community radio station, Salam Radio, 106.2 FM.
Assalamu alaikum and welcome back to Why Politics Matters here on Salam Radio 106.2 FM. Thank you so much for joining us again. I'm joined here by Nicola Day, who's joined myself and Alex to talk about the local elections, the successes, the failures, the representation and what might happen at the local council going forward. We just finished talking about obviously some of the massive Green successes and the fact that we're a small party, so one win is a 50% increase in our number of councillors, which is obviously fantastic. Labour had a few really good results. Obviously, North Ward, surprising that they pulled that through, and Bretton we mentioned, and Fletton and Woodstone we mentioned, but they lost 2 seats to the Conservatives, and that was what basically just made Conservatives feel like they'd not had a complete disaster of an election. So talk a little bit about the history of Park Ward and how we got to where we got to, just based on your knowledge, Nicola.
Yeah, so I actually live in Park Ward, and I've stood as a candidate for Labour in Park Ward, interestingly enough, with the late, great John Shearman back in 2012, 2013, that era. I remember Park Ward always being Conservative for a long time. John Shearman came along, did lots of campaigning and won. Obviously, he was also, I think it helped that he was a previous head teacher at a local school.
Yep,
and everybody knew him.
Teacher, I knew him.
And then Richard Ferris came and joined him. And then I can't remember who was the third in, because I actually moved away from Peterborough for about 3 or 4 years. But
was it Matthew Mahabharti?
I think it could have been. It
because
was while I was away.
I know Shaz came in when John Sherman retired.
That's right. Yeah.
I can't remember the third one was.
But yeah, so then they won year upon year to take Park back from the Conservatives to Labour, and then obviously this year, there's been some there's been people leave the party, as we know. Shaz Nawaz resigned, Iqra Yazin then followed him to resign, and then they put 2 other candidates in that were pretty much unknown at that point, and that was only 3 or 4 months before the local elections.
It probably wasn't even that. Yeah, it was very close to the local elections.
So as a resident, I don't know what happened really in terms of them losing. I do know that I didn't get much through my door. I got a couple of Conservative leaflets, didn't get much else through my door. And, I was very busy out in my ward, obviously, doing everything that we were doing. So I may have missed a door knocking session. But yeah, I'm not, to take it over that long ago and to hold it for so long, it must have been a real loss. And that was the last result to come in, wasn't it? Do you remember on that night?
Because of the by-election, they were doing the other method of counting where they had to stick them onto panel boards and then count across and all that. But Alex, takes so long for you to win the ward from the Conservatives as a Labour group. Yeah. You've got 3 councillors in there. You're dominant in that ward. You have to. If you've got 3 councillors, you're pretty much dominant in that ward. How do you think that's come about? The fact that they've lost 2 councillors just in one election.
But you said yourself, I think there, Nick, if I picked up right, that you didn't receive any literature from Labour at all through your posting?
I'd received something from Iqra Yazin, one of the standing councillors. But then she resigned.
Stood down. So as far as whoever was campaigning in that ward, who was seeking representation, you never received anything whatsoever to even tell you who that was or their name.
Yeah. And maybe my street was just missed, or maybe they missed my house because I had green vote posters in my window.
That could have been. To be fair.
There you go. So you've had a ward councillor that stood down. Nobody's even notified them who's going to be standing for that ward. Was the ward councillor somebody that was actually even previous to this, heavily known by the residents in that area? I get the impression not. And if we counter that with, let's have a look at where you guys won. Everybody knows your face. They know your name. You put leaflets through the door, whether you're campaigning for elections and for votes or not.
So
there's the story, isn't it, really? And just going back to those shifts that we've seen as well, it seems to me that right across the board, the story of these elections was a movement away from the two-party narrative and one looking for good ward councillors and the electorate looking for people that will actually represent them and not a party.
So I completely back that, and I think that's probably our responsibility as well. Being on Why Politics Matters is to encourage people to vote for policies and vote for people, and don't just vote for a brand because the brand changes day on day. The brand changes, so you need to look at what it is specifically that's being offered to you, and whether it appeals to you, and only then should you cast your vote. I think certainly in Park Ward, I think a lot of people have just been voting Labour because they usually vote Labour, or they're voting Tories because they usually vote Tories. And like you said, Fiona Radic for the Green Party got more votes this time around than the Green have ever had.
With some murmurings within the Labour Party I've heard being suggesting that her running was the reason for them not gaining that seat. And to that I would say, no, her campaigning is what highlighted your lack of campaigning.
Absolutely. But Labour's loss is Conservatives' gain.
Sadly so.
Two new councillors come on to the council, gentleman named Irfan and a gentleman named Asif Iqbal, I believe his name is. I don't know Asif too well. Irfan I've come across a number of times, and I mean, again, without exposing his politics on air, he's a really nice guy. He's very, very community oriented. It just goes back to what you said about how people need to know you. They need to know your name, your face, and what you stand for. He's had lots and lots of dealings within the community. Does a lot of charity work. Does a lot of community work. For me, and I'm sure you'll agree, he's wearing the wrong badge as far as we're concerned. But he's
a good ward councillor.
He's a good ward councillor. Yeah, isn't he? And one thing I can say is there was a number of people that spoke to me about Park Ward and how they felt like he was going to do it. He was a good guy, but they were basically selling him like I've got to vote in Park Ward, and I'm like, look, I'm never going to vote in Park Ward, and even if I did, I'd never vote Conservative. But yeah, you do you. It's absolutely fine, So not a massive surprise that he won. To be honest, to be quite frank, the fact that they swept the floor, they got two councillors in at the same time was probably a bit of a surprise. I felt like that might be a two-way split, but that was the one thing that saved face for the Conservative Party here in Peterborough. What do you think?
No, I agree totally. Yeah. Otherwise, they would have really been struggling now, especially with these people that have crossed the bench over to independents.
Yeah. So they went from 30 or 29 down to 27, then they got the two in Park, so 29, 30, whatever it was. So they got back up to 30. But I mean,
without that, they'd be what, 24?
They'd be 26. 24.
Yeah.
24.
That's a big shift.
It's a massive shift, yeah.
Huge shift.
This next question I'm going to ask you, Alex. Nicola, I accept that you probably don't want to answer this, but I'd love to get your...
controversy.
Yeah, a little bit of controversy. What are your thoughts on councillors winning for a particular party and then defecting? Now, we don't have to talk specifically about the four defectors. I mean, I did that. I defected, but I defected a year and a half into my 2-year term. It's not like I defected a week after or 2 weeks after the electorate's just voted me in. But here you've got 4 councillors recently and 1 councillor last year. So 5 councillors in the last 2 years have defected from the party on whose ticket they got elected. Your thoughts, Alex?
Let's go back to that first point that I made about why we haven't had a shift in power locally already. And the reason for that is because of party leaders following diktat, which they're given from their national party out of Westminster, rather than representing their local electorate and seeing what they can do and what they can change locally. It's back to representative democracy as well. I don't believe that national party politics really has a place to play in local politics.
I agree. I completely agree.
And so therefore, if parties, members who have been elected to represent under representative democracy feel that they can't do that under the flag that they've been branded with, then they have to change that brand into something which frees their hands and frees them to be able to represent those people that they have a responsibility to.
And one of the biggest reasons I completely agree with what you're saying is because so much power has been stripped from local councils.
Yeah.
If local councils could still influence education and healthcare and policing and justice and those kinds of things, then you'd say, well, no, I completely get why Labour want to influence the Labour group and the Conservatives want to influence the Conservative group. But we don't. What do we talk about? We talk about whether or not we fund the purchase of an asset, or we sell an asset, and whether or not we can, serve the academic requirements of children in need, and whether or not we could provide adult social services. And it's these kinds of things that we deal with day in, day out. We don't deal with the normal things that you'd expect politicians to be dealing with, the national policy, the NHS, the police. We don't do that.
That is a job for Westminster. That's in the big house, isn't it? Locally, what they're here for, you're here for, my apologies, I didn't mean to be quite sort of is to represent the electorate. That's it, plain and simple. It's not about power. It's about facilitation. It's about being a voice and making sure that every single person that lives in your ward has an opportunity to have their voice heard within the local democracy setting.
I'm going to push you on an answer, though. Do you think it's dishonest?
No.
On the part of the candidate?
I think if people feel it is dishonest, then I feel that actually they've been let down by the national system, not politically educating them about what local politics and how it differs from national politics.
That's a fair point. You know what? I really like that answer. I don't know if I agree with it, but I think it's a solid answer. I want to bring you back in, Nicola. So tell us about what the options are on the table without telling us anything that might be confidential.
Okay.
Right now, so we went into the local elections with a Conservative administration. We've come out of the local elections with 30 Conservatives elected. Now they've had 4 defections and they've got 26. 26 isn't enough to form an administration. So what's happening?
Oh no, 26 is enough to form an administration, but it's called a minority administration.
Okay.
So at the moment, my updates for everyone are, I'm not going to go into what we've discussed as a
Absolutely
coalition.
not, no,
what I will say is we have had opposition leaders and deputies meetings. We have been discussing things.
Okay.
So the Conservatives can still run the administration, and based on the annual council meeting, they are. We were all called into an emergency meeting just before the full council meeting to ask what discussions we had had as
Sure.
opposition parties. And as I mentioned earlier, what we've managed to agree is, we've managed to negotiate now that we've got larger numbers as an opposition than the Conservatives, is that we will retain all of the chair seats. Now, that wasn't on the table. There was another negotiation that we were having, and I won't go into details, but all of the chair seats, so all the scrutiny committees and the regulatory committees, we will now chair those. So we've taken some of that control and influence from the Conservatives. However, as it stands, they are still a minority administration. They will take the cabinet positions. Now, the cabinet is the layer above the chair seat, and the cabinet decides, makes the key decisions. Having said that, what I would say is that our CEO, Matt Gladstone at the council, he's our chief exec, does want us to continue working together in a very collaborative way, which is why he's trying to draw us together. So we will still be going to the financial sustainability working groups, and whilst our politics may be different, I think from my perspective, and representing the residents that I represent and the party policies that I want to see happen, I would like to see what happens with this bigger group now of independents.
Okay.
How will they vote? Will they vote together on certain issues? Will they be close to us on policy and motions, or will they be quite far away? And I think, from my perspective, it would be good if we can gauge that for the next few months.
So you should put in a motion that might split the vote and just get a good indicator.
Of course, at any time we could put a vote of no confidence in the leadership. At any time we can put a vote of no confidence together. Okay. So there is that option if that's what we feel we need to do. But as I say, I can't talk about the nitty-gritty details of what we discussed, but that is a situation at the moment, that there is a Conservative minority administration. Whether I agree with that or not, my personal perspective is that, yes, we should probably try and form a coalition's opposition, but we've got to respect the other opposition groups, and we've got to see how this year pans out, if that makes sense as well.
So the Greens can't do it by themselves, Labour can't do it by themselves, Lib Dems can't do it by themselves, Peterborough First can't do it by themselves. Between the 4 of you could do it, but then there's lots of other questions to be answered as well, whether or not the NEC would allow Labour to do a coalition, whether...
you say allow. And let's just be honest about that language, isn't it? Nobody allows us to do anything or disallows us to do anything. We all have choices to be made. And just as I said, The Guardian has reported this week that there are councils in the country that are not listening to the NEC. So I'd kind of throw it back and I'd say that actually if there's going to be a shift in power, I might be wrong on this, but in my opinion, that shift in power actually really lies on Dennis Jones's head, and whether or not Dennis is going to listen to the
Councillor
NEC,
Dennis Jones, leader of
the
Labour
Labour
Group,
Party, and whether or not he is going to listen to the NEC on this chance, on this this time around, or whether he's going to say no. We can have a shift and a change locally that would represent Peterborough citizens in a positive manner.
So I'll share something
and
with
I'm
you.
going to do it.
I'll share something with you, which occurred in a meeting last year that I was a part of.
Right.
I challenged the leader then, Shaz Nawaz, to go against the NEC's guidelines or a diktat basically.
Sure.
And said, let's just
do what I'm suggesting here.
What are the repercussions? And he said, well, the repercussions are we'd all get suspended from the Labour Party. I said, but we'd still be councillors.
We'd still be electing
We'd still be
your
councillors.
electorate,
Yes, we'd still
yeah?
be councillors. We'd still be able to do what we want to do. Yes, we would.
So you'd still form that coalition of power, yes?
Nicola, you want to come in?
I want to come in to say that I was part of those discussions last year as group as I just become group leader,
Sure.
and the first thing we were doing after the elections, and we worked, me and Councillor Kirsty Knight, our deputy in the Green Party, we worked solidly. We were on the phone all of the time, talking to all of the parties, and Councillor Nawaz, at the time he was Labour group leader, rang me and then said, I'm really sorry, this was about 11 o'clock at night. And I was like, do you know what, I think we can do this. And we worked really, really hard to bring the groups together. And then he explained that the NEC wouldn't allow him. And my initial reaction was...
Forget the NEC, yeah.
My initial reaction was, well, why don't you all join the Greens? Because you'll be able to run the council then, because the Greens don't have that diktat.
Sure.
We don't have a hierarchical... leadership. We have more of a horizontal leadership. It's more about empowering local communities and doing, that kind of thing. But we were absolutely gutted because we put so much work in, myself and Councillor Knight, and I always said I knew it would be difficult to bring 4 groups together, but I was willing to give it a shot because to me that's what Peterborough had voted for.
Sure.
If that makes sense.
Yeah, I get that.
Hey, I'd argue that the more groups you've got having to batter out a way forward is actually more democratic than just having that one party that has pure power. I mean, let's just face it, if they are allowed to make a minority minority administration, then the majority of people are not being represented.
Hang on. Let me throw this in there then. What's stopping the Labour group from forming a minority administration?
Not enough seats.
But the Conservatives don't have enough seats.
They'd have the majority minority.
Oh,
yeah,
Do you
the
follow me?
Conservatives
Yeah.
have got the majority of the they've got
If that
the
makes
most
sense.
seats.
so nobody's
Yeah.
got more than 50%.
But they
Therefore,
have
the
the
only
most.
administration that could form a minority administration is the largest number of seats, which it currently is the Conservatives.
Without a coalition, which
Without a coalition.
creates a majority.
Yeah, got it.
I was just going to say, so when we were having these coalition talks last year, I looked at some research at countries in Europe and councils in Europe, and both at parliamentary level and at local council level, it's much more usual to have rainbow coalitions, which we as Greens argue is much more representative.
Sure.
Yes, some of the independents might have, centre-right views. Yes, we as Greens probably sit a bit more left-wing on the perspective, but actually, as people, we're all here to do the best for the city of Peterborough
Yes.
and for the people in Peterborough.
And what
So-
you've just described, isn't that actually more representative of society?
Absolutely.
Now, everybody knows I sit very firmly on the left, but that doesn't mean that I'm saying that nobody on the right should be able to get a voice. And that 2% of people, that whatever it is, they still deserve a voice in
Do
the
you really
democratic
believe what
situation.
you've just said?
No, I do. Yeah,
Do you?
You've got to bring these things in the light, and it's only there that you can actually have conversations that alter it, change it, or even change people's minds. Yeah, I do. Yeah.
Well, we're going to have to talk about that off air.
I actually think.
No, we shall. Yeah.
Let's just imagine this for at the moment. At the moment, we've got Wayne Fitzgerald, Councillor Wayne Fitzgerald, who is the leader of the Conservatives.
Yeah,
But had we a coalition, we would have Councillor Chris Harper,
potentially.
myself,
Christian Hogg.
Councillor Christian Hogg,
And Dennis
and Councillor Dennis Jones. Now, I think
And
between the
Foxy
four
as well,
of us,
maybe. Oh no,
No,
sorry,
he's
sorry.
he's not
Of
leader,
course,
but
yeah, my bad.
between the four of us, I think we're all quite reasonable people, and I think we could all thrash out a good way forward. And you've got 4 for the price of 1. And, yes, we might not all agree absolutely politically, but I haven't felt in any of the meetings I've had with them, including meetings on the FSWG, that we aren't all going in the right direction, in the same direction. I mean, for example, Councillor Chris Harper, much to my amazement, held a Peterborough climate debate in his ward. And I actually said to him, thanks for doing that. You know, those things that I set up. He actually went and held that in his ward, which I was really pleased about, because actually he was one of the last councillors that I would have thought would have held that sort of thing for his residents. And actually, so it just goes to show that a lot of councillors are actually on the same page about some of the issues.
Yeah, I can,
does that make sense?
I can certainly vouch for that. I was in on one leaders and deputy leaders meeting last year, just on invite, because there was some financial things being discussed, and I did feel like it was a very collaborative. We had Christian Hogg and Nick Samford, yourself and Kirsty. It was Shaz and Amjad at the time, not Dennis and Amjad, and Councillor Chris Harper, and I don't know if it was. Might be John Fox was there. But yeah, it was a very, very productive. So you're right. If you did go into a coalition, the people of Peterborough would get a 4 for the price of 1. And definitely, you know, I mean, considering, you know, for local elections, only 35% of the people vote in the whole city. And of those, you know, about a third vote for the Conservatives. There's only 10% of the population of people that want Wayne Fitzgerald to run the council. If you bring it out in the nuts and bolts of it, the black and white of it, 10% of the electorate want Wayne Fitzgerald as their leader at the council. So,
I mean, the only negative I can see is that logistically it might be quite difficult. We might have to have a lot of meetings, but I would certainly, and I said this last year, I would certainly put the time aside on the table to work out how we would work that between all of us.
I love your reaction there, Alex, because your reaction was pretty much what I expect the reaction of every person voting out there is. We don't care if you've got extra meetings. Yeah. We want you to do the right thing by us,
exactly.
Right? Yeah, that's what people want. That's what the people demand.
There should be lots of meetings.
And that's not hard, though, is it?
No, it's not.
It's not hard.
And just going back to what you were saying about like these rainbow coalitions and how it represents, I mean, if you don't go into a library researching a subject and only choose 3 books off the shelf and say that you've researched the whole subject. Yeah, you have a look at all the arguments, all the perspectives and all the books on that subject that are on a shelf. If not, you're not actually doing yourself justice. And democracy, for me, it works the exact same way. Whilst the only voice that we're having heard of the Conservative voice as funneled through Wayne Fitzgerald and none of the others, we're not being served best because we're only hearing one idea when there's actually a whole menu of ideas that need to be brought into, discussed, and only then, when all these ideas are brought to the forefront and discussed, can you find the best way forward.
And here's another thought. What about, you know, with the situation that we've got, what about an all-party policy?
Yeah, so an all-party administration.
So that we have representatives from all the groups in those cabinet levels, so that high, you know, decision-making level.
Yes.
And we share the chair seats, you know, between each of the groups 50-50. I mean...
So I spoke to Ed Murphy about this, and he explained it to me, and I thought, that sounds like the best possible outcome, because there's, you know, don't get me wrong, I'm not a Conservative, not a big fan of Conservatives, but they've got some good people. They've got some very, very capable people, as have the Labour group, as have the Greens, as have the Lib Dems, as have Peterborough First. So the group leaders would naturally pick their best people to go sit in those seats. And if you're relying on the Conservatives to form an administration, when they've lost people like, you know, Councillor Hiller, who's an excellent councillor, don't agree with his politics, but he's brilliant on planning committee, he's brilliant on a number of things, very well versed, very experienced. That experience is gone now, as is, you know, Councillor Bisbee's experience, as Councillor Rush's experience. All that experience is gone.
Councillor Hiller is now going to be the chair of the Constitution and Ethics Committee.
Interesting, isn't it? It's interesting how so if you rely on a now depleted party to still fill all the cabinet positions, then
with less resources than it had last year.
Then you know just by the law of large numbers, right? You've got fewer talented people in those seats,
and therefore citizens are being served
less well. Yeah, completely. So, I mean, it's a challenge to you then, Councillor Day, in that, you know, you should probably, given you've got a free hand from the National Green Party, you should probably be going into these discussions thinking electorate first, everything else comes second, electorate first. And if there are doubts about whether or not, you know, Peterborough First are just a Tory light, it may well be. But if you're at the table, you're at the table. You know, if there's doubts about whether or not the Labour group will be allowed to enter into a coalition, they may not be allowed to, but let's take it to that point first and ask them to ask the question.
Questions of them.
And when they get the response, when they get the response, and we tell the Peterborough electorate again that the Labour group don't want to go into a coalition because of the NEC, the electorate will just get fed up and say, right, we can't work with them, we need to work with somebody else.
Well, I think group leaders may well get fed up and who knows what could happen.
Yeah, and the other thing I'd say is, if we don't now, and again, this is, obviously this is just talking between friends on a political radio show, but if we don't now think about a coalition to wrestle control off of the Tory administration, then it's not going to happen next year, because there's no way you get significant change in one election cycle or two or three. It probably takes about 4 election cycles for you to be able to get enough change for you to then form a coalition between 2 parties that are minority, or 3 parties and exclude Labour or exclude the League Deputy, or whoever it is that's not playing ball. So I feel like if you're not doing it now, you're basically saying we're not going to do it for the next 5 years. Thoughts on that?
Yeah, and one of my, having sat on the opposition benches, one of my, ambitions, I guess, was to come into politics to eventually be in control of the council, because I think that, if we've got the right people in the right places, I don't think that always the right people have been in the right places. And I think we've got to do what's best for the city. So when we are talking about assets and when we are looking, I have to say that the council has changed quite a lot in this year. There's been lots of directors leave, new directors have joined.
Yeah, absolutely, yeah.
There's been a real transformation. And for the first time ever, and I think you know this, Imtiaz, is that, we went to budget opposition meetings, and it was really the Greens that put some ideas forward that
Absolutely,
they've actually listened to and worked up. And that was the first time, that we've had that. So yes, definitely, that is what I've come into politics for, to be in control of a council.
Excellent. Well, I want to thank you, Councillor Nicholas Day, for coming on today, joining us. You've given us some really good insights. Interesting, Alex, because there was a number of things I actually didn't know that I've learned today. So thanks for that.
It's always about that, isn't it?
Yeah.
Thanks very much.
We're all out of time, guys. Thank you so much for joining us. We'll be back again next week.
Thanks, Nick. Cheers.
You're listening to Salam Radio, and it's now time for